Hello and welcome to SonicLAB. No doubt you'll have been waiting for this as eagerly as I have. This is the brand new ASM Ashun Sound Machines Hydrasynth. The Hydrasynth is a brand new synthesizer from a brand new manufacturer. It's an all digital DSP affair, wavetable, morphing wavetable synthesizer with 8 voices and 3 oscillators per voice and a whole load of other stuff besides. The ASM Hydrasynth is a solidly constructed unit. I mean, it's metal case, everything feels good quality. We've even got these aluminium side panels, and it's made in China by a Chinese company. ASM, I think they're registered in Hong Kong, but they're sort of linked to a big factory complex who've been making synthesizers for a really long time. So they know how to make this stuff, and now they're designing it as well with the help of Glenn Darcy and a bunch of other people that they brought together to create their first hardware product. One of the biggest deals, they've got their own Keybed. They've made their own plyphonic aftertouch Keybed. I mean, there's not many people who are making this. This is a new design. They call it PolyTouch, and it is a polyphonic aftertouch. There's also a ribbon controller on this. So we're sort of getting into kind of a nod to the CS80, because as we know, the CS80 is classically expressive, both having poly aftertouch and the ribbon controller. And they do say in the literature, yeah, it was an inspiration. As well as that, we've also got some analog I/O. We've got inputs for CV, Mod 1 and Mod 2. Then we've got pitch, gate, Mod 1, Mod 2 and clock out. So we can hook this up with the outside world in an analog fashion. At the centre of it is this master controller. We get 8 rotary encoders and 8 buttons and a kind of continually updating display. And the display is affected by what we're doing here. We've got all these modules. This synth has quite a high specification, like I say, 3 oscillators per voice. But we've also got 5 envelopes, 5 LFOs, a pair of filters, including this dedicated filter control stuff, access filter 1 and filter 2, 1, 2, 3 oscillators, these mutators, which are nicely labelled mutant, which is just kind of a little, which are 2 per voice, 2 per oscillator. The first 2 oscillators are morphing wavetable oscillators. The third one is a fix. There's also a mixer and ring noise. But aside from all that, we've also got a whole bunch of effects in here. There's pre-effects, which can be any number of chorus, flanger, rotary, phaser, lo-fi, tremolo and EQ and compression. And then there's the post effects, which is the same after the delay and the reverb. So there's a lot to be going on with here. I mean, on paper, this thing's to be hugely specified. I guess it's really down to what does it sound like? So let's jump right in and start with an initial patch, and we'll come straight to the kind of centerpiece here, so because we can see what's going on. This is just a straight sawtooth, and you also see we've got this rather nice AMOLED display here, which is a bit kind of corgi in its design and gives us a lot of information, including a nice waveform display. We've also got coloured, this is the program select wheel. You might want to grab it for something else, but don't, because it will change patches. But when you hit save, you can actually, if you want, I don't know if this will pick up here, you can set the colour. We've got up to 32 colours, so you can actually change this, and it also changes the colour of the pitch and the mod wheels as well, which may be something that you find useful. I mean, any kind of visual stimulation and visual cues are always a good thing. Anyway, hit oscillator 1 and come in close. Got the basic waves, sine, triangle, trisaw, saw, square, pulse, and then we're into these wavetables, and there are 219 of these. Just go and go and go and go. So we can actually dial in just the fixed wave, and the wavetable is done in a slightly different way to this, because it's in this mode we're in single mode, but if we go into wave scan mode, we would then edit the wave list, and then we've got 8 slots, so we could put our, let's go right up to the end. There was some interesting harmonics. There are so many of them. I think you can we go up in 10s? Oh no, I think that's, oh. So what this is actually doing is loading in the sequence of waves. So it goes in blocks of 8 and then just fills them all up. So if we just go back down here and then go back out, we can wave scan. There very interesting sound. I'm going to put some release on that and start playing with it already. And immediately I'm actually going, ooh, that sounds nice. That would sound nice in some reverb. So let's do just that. Stick a bit of reverb on it. And then come back out to our oscillator and wait. Might be a bit better. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, basically each wave has 9 points between each of the waves. So we've got effectively 10 interpolated slices in between each of these positions. Does that make sense? So that's sounding already, you're sounding really nice and very, very rich, and we're already into Wavetable. I haven't really gone over the other waves. But then we're getting into the concepts of these mutators. If I hit a mutator here, we can then apply additional processing to that oscillator. So we've got FM mode, linear, wave stack mode. Wave stack's kind of interesting. Because what that's doing is effectively creating, let's take the reverb off there. A big detune. If we come back out again and start. Creating this kind of big detune stack. I don't know how many there is because I haven't got the manual, but I'm guessing that could be maybe 8 or 4. And then on top of that, we could also go into mono mode or unison mode, because these are the modes that we have. We have poly, mono, mono low, mono high, unison. So if we go to unison, 8 density. Stereo width. Now, I mean, this is really opening up the power of Wavetable. I mean, Wavetable synthesis is not new. I mean, we've seen it around a lot of time. Waldorf have been doing it for years. I mean, PPG, you know, it's been around for decades, centuries even, we could say, or certainly since last century. But bringing it together into an interface like this, which is actually, while this is a very complicated synthesizer, because there's a lot, it could do a lot of stuff, the way they've chosen to kind of modularize it and use these master controls is very intuitive, and it's actually fairly straightforward. I mean, yes, there's going to be lots of menus and pages, but they're very easy to get at, because the menu and page system is this great big section here, and we get, you know, we got our pages, say for instance on an envelope, we've got all these additional parameters, so you can kind of see how quick, you know, once you get the rules, it's really straightforward to do. So anyway, I've also heard rumours that there are multiple types of PWM, which of course we're going to have to check out really, aren't we? So let's do just that. Go to an empty patch, go to the oscillator, go into square wave mode. Let's have a listen to some of that. Got a good bit of thump to it. So how do we get multiple methods of pulse width modulation, I hear you ask? Well, again, it's down to the mutations or the mutators. So hitting mutator 1 and coming back to our center section, we've got FM mode linear, which will give us exactly that. Then we've got wave stack, which we've looked at. Then we've got oscillator sync, which you may as well listen to. But then we've got some PWM mode. So right, I'm coming back here. So here's my square wave. It's quite handy that we've got this. So now I'm going to take the depth. I'm not really sure what the ratio does in this instance. But you can see we've got a regular PWM mode, nice. But there's a PWM mode squeeze, which has, thanks to this, again, a sort of different flavour. We could have obviously modulate this. We'll get onto that in a second. And then finally, we've got this PWM mode ASM, which doesn't seem to make any difference here until we go to custom edit. And then we've got these individual warp points. Come back out again. I have no idea what that's doing, but that's a really sort of wonky and very interesting PWM. And you're hearing all this kind of breakup and distortion, but it's not. It's pulse width modulator. It's one mutator on one oscillator. So anyway, well, let's modulate that. So again, this is where we get into even depth, because we've got basically mod matrix. Mod matrix has 32 slots, right? Let's just think about that for a while. 32 slots. We don't want 32 slots. I'm just going to come back out to my mutator. I'm just going to go to an original amount, and we're going to go to our mod matrix, and we're going to assign the mod matrix, and we're going to take, and I'm going to go for LFO 3, which is now just come up here. So that's a sort of shortcut. Press down, and I'm going to assign that to mutant 1, which I just pressed the mutant button and it showed up. And then we're not going to ratio, we're going to have depth. And we can affect sort of some interesting I personally prefer a triangle for modulation. It's just something I'm more familiar with. Oh, I don't know what the feedback does, but that's really interesting. Crikey, I mean, this is where things are getting really deep, aren't they? I mean, that sort of pulse width modulation, it's not quite as sort of perfect as it would be if it was a standard oscillator, but it takes you, I mean, what on earth is that? We haven't even got into the filter yet. That's just that. I mean, and that's crazy. And don't forget, an LFO here is per voice. And remember, there are 5 LFOs per voice. And there's also 5 envelopes per voice, and they're also loopable. So if you haven't got enough LFOs, you could have, well, 10, if that's what you really want. Oh yeah, and there's one more, which is at a voice level that's just global for vibrato. So that should be enough to be getting on with, right? So around the back, we've got a little main switch. We've got this 12 volt milliamp power supply, which I have to say is one of the tiniest power supplies I've ever seen, considering the size of this thing. USB MIDI, which is class compliant, in, out and through on full-size MIDI DINs, expression pedal in, sustain pedal, and then a stereo audio output. On the top we've got CV inputs, mod 1 and mod 2, then we've got pitch, CV gate, mod 1, mod 2 and clock outputs. These are all highly configurable in the internal settings. So let's get into the filters. There are 2 filters. 1 and 2, we can access the parameters either via the main block here or via this dedicated section here, whereby we can just hit 1 and 2. Now, they're all DSP, just remember this. The first filter has multiple models, so let's just start with that because that's probably the easiest to look at. Let's just start with the first one because that's easy to look at. We've got low pass ladder 12. This is just a straight sawtooth. Resonance, nothing kind of too dramatic, but we do actually have a drive as well, which offers quite a lot of extra hum. It's sort of like a hoof to that. And I won't go through all of these filters. Low pass gate's kind of an interesting one. It's got quite a bratty, sort of slightly distorted sound. an interesting one. And of course, the MS-20s are nice. The high pass is very handy. Get those really, I mean, I don't know if you're picking up that. Add the drive. Massive low end. And then these high pass, and then we've got these modelled boutique filters, which are quite nice. Add some drive to that. These sound actually quite chunky. I quite like the sound of these. And then finally there's this valve filter, which is actually quite cool. So, I mean, there's a ton of stuff. And then the second filter is more of a fixed SEM type, and you can run them in series and parallel. Then, you know, they're not analog filters, but they are pretty good, and they do have quite a lot of different flavors to it. So you can create some really massive harmonics, all the drive. I actually think they've done a pretty good job with these. Right, so I figured probably a good way to demonstrate some more features is by deconstructing a sound, and that's what I've got here. I've called this one Wave Cello. It's something I programmed up, and it's essentially a wave scan with 4 waves in it, and the modulation is the LFO4 is modulating the wave scan to give that sort of bowed vibe. And the pressure is affecting the speed of the bowing. It's also affecting the filter ever so slightly. It's also affecting the pitch of the oscillator. So we get all this expressivity over the poly aftertouch. There's effects, there's other things. But what I'm doing here, and it's probably interesting to see, if I exit out of here, I've set these macros up so I can switch the effects off. And I can also bypass the filter, because in the mixer, there's this rather cool feature which allows you to blend between the filter and direct. So you can have that with the 3 oscillators. You could also have it with the ring modulation and the noise, and set the routing here and the panning. So it's a kind of cool feature, but I've set that up on this macro. Now each macro, while we're about it, allows you to have, so if I go to macro edit and I say edit one that I haven't got, I can have up to 8 destinations for each for a button and for the knob. So we've got some really deep kind of per patch control, and I can label them here. I've got this effect, so effects are on. Now I'm back in the filter. Turn the wave scanning off, more or less. Haven't quite figured that one out. So if I take now the filter off, you can hear there's a lot of character that's being added with the filter. So what am I doing in the filter? Right. So in the filter, filter 1 is a low pass gate with quite high resonance, but it has a curious resonance. I've also got quite, the cutoff lower. And then filter 2, I've got, this is the SEMS kind of filter. I've got a bit of envelope to give me that extra sort of attack when I hit harder. And the cutoff and a fairly low resonance. So if you notice here, what I'm... I get a bit more attack when I hit a bit harder. It's quite subtle stuff, but this is all happening in the mod matrix, and the mod matrix is, I'm using quite a few of these. I'm using LFO to wave scan, and I'm using poly aftertouch to the filter cutoff, only a little bit, and then poly aftertouch to the LFO rate, which is the bowing. But then also what I'm doing is I'm using the poly aftertouch to affect the pitch of the oscillator. So if I only a little bit, but if I turn it up, just giving it a little bit of a nudge. So that means that when I'm playing, there's this sort of wonky pitch, which is what you get with a cello. So it feels a bit more atmospheric. So that's basically my patch. So if I come back out and I switch the effects back on, switch the filter in, and I've got my wave scanning. I know, I think that works pretty well. So anyway, let's have a look at the envelopes because they've got a few tricks up their sleeves as well. Okay, let's take a look. It's very simple sound. This is just a sawtooth, one oscillator into envelope with a filter. And the filter is the low pass 3 lure, which is the custom filter, which you could see right there. So now let's take a look at the envelopes. Now, by default, envelope 1 is routed to the filters. So I could just dial it in here. So what I'm going to do is I hit my envelope, just press that once. So we've got our regular controls, attack, decay, sustain, release, but we've also got D, delay and hold, and also BPM sync, which means these move in divisions of the clock, which is pretty cool. Next page, we've got the curves, and we can change the curves of all of the stages of the envelope, which is again, is kind of cool. But then we've got this envelope mode, loop mode. So I'm going to go into infinite mode, right? So now I can play a bit of... So it's just repeating. I can take that. Some really nice sort of just repeating sounds, which is kind of cool. Let's get a bit of reverb up on that. So it's slow down. Right, let's put a bit of chorus on into there, probably a bit of delay. Then I'm in second filter. I'm actually going to, I've just got it routed in parallel. Rerun and not reset, which means it's one envelope per note. So essentially, I can, this is, it's kind of like a looper almost. I'm using the envelope to re-trigger and then I'm modulating. It's just, it's really inspiring. I mean, I have to say, I mean, one thing I will say about this instrument is it doesn't give everything up with great ease. It's not like just, you know, analog oscillator into an analog filter. Ooh, that sounds nice. Don't need to think about it anymore. You have to work a little bit harder at this, but there are some absolutely fantastic features in it. And I suppose I'm being a bit gushing about it because I don't think I've come across a synthesizer where so much synthesis is so near the front panel. I should also point out that if we go to the LFO, the LFO also has one-shot mode, so we can use the LFOs like envelopes and we can use the envelopes like LFOs. So there's a ton of modulation. And remember, the mod matrix has 32 slots. Remember that? So I don't think you're going to run out of stuff too easily. Right, okay, I've just set up another patch. That's because I just wanted to show you some more aspects to the Hydrasynth. I think actually I'm going to struggle to get through everything, but this is another thing that I think probably you're going to be very interested in as synthesis, because we've got the CV gate inputs and outputs here. I've set up a patch here that just demonstrates what is going on and how we can route things. What I've got is the CV in mod 1 coming in from this Lifeforms SV1, and it's coming out of the sine wave output, and it's modulating filter 2. So and it goes up quite high, so it's already reading it pretty well. I've got a load of stereo business going on in the voice selections, which I can show you here. So there's stereo width and detune and analog flavor. I'm in poly mode. So just sort of doing a bit of extra business there. But also I've got the mod 1 output coming out of here and going into the rate of the Lifeforms 1. And what I'm routing that, so if I can find it, right, so mod 1 in is going to filter 2 cutoff. And then mod wheel CV output, mod output, is going to mod output 1, which is this guy here, which is driving the rate of this oscillator. So when I'm doing this, just to prove that it is doing that, if I come out of here and go into the square output, you can see what's going on. So the analog communications work pretty well, and I think it reads to a pretty decent standard. And there's quite a lot of settings in the settings here to sort of set the voltage ranges, the polarity, how the clock behaves. So I don't think you'd be too disappointed with all of that stuff. Now, just a couple more things. I know it seems kind of hard to imagine there's more stuff to show. I guess we should look at the effects very briefly, because I don't think we can spend all that much time in it. I'm going to press the reverb. I'll just come back out of my sine wave mod to make it a bit nice. So we've got we've got hall, room, plate, cloud, which is a bit more like a shimmer, and that allows us, we can create a frozen and separate low damp and high damp settings. Wow. Yeah, so the reverbs are really nice, the delays are nice. Just wanted to show you that one because it's quite an aspect these days, isn't it? That sort of frozen reverb, and it's nice to see they've included it. We've also got this arpeggiator here, which it's on the face of it a fairly simple and straightforward. I should mention I've got no manual for this, but I pretty much found out how to do everything. I didn't have any problems, and you know, I'm the sort of person that gets incredibly frustrated if things become too obscure in a new synth. You know, that's just my impatience. So I think you'll find it's probably quite easy to use. But anyway, back to this. Arpeggiator, all the usual stuff, order, random. You know, here we've got the tempo. I'll just play a couple of, let me just play. Okay, it's a 303 thing, but never mind. So then we got a ratchet. So this is like a sort of random repeat step. We set the chance, we set the gate. Clock, divisions, swing, all of that stuff. I mean, I'm not going to go too deep on the arpeggiator. I mean, suffice to say, it seems to be perfectly serviceable and works pretty good. Overall, I think this is a really good synth. I mean, there's no denying it. I think for the money, yes, it's all digital, but I think we're over that kind of distinction, aren't we now? The amount of features you get with this are insane, really. Just the sheer number of envelopes, oscillators, mod slot matrix, the effects are really good. You know, the filter models sound really interesting, and they also work very well. Poly aftertouch, the ribbon controller. There is a desktop version as well, but I didn't even get into that, and I've got that in a box out the back. Maybe I'll cover that in another episode, but for now I just wanted to get you my thoughts on this. And my thoughts are, Hydrasynth from Ashun Sound Machines, ASM, it's a pretty damn good synth. I think it's $1,299 US. I'm not sure of the UK currency of this, but that's for this version, and the desktop I think is $799. So it's actually, I think, really well priced. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.